Today I'm taking a look back at 8 of my most recent knits and giving you my completely candid, honest feelings on how I've been feeling about them now that I've had a chance to actually wear them. Because let's face it, not every knit works out, and some actually surprise you. I got a lot to share today, so let's get into it. Welcome everyone to Goodknits. I'm Sherry, and this is my channel here on YouTube where I share all my thoughts on knitting and my very real experiences and journey. This is the 3rd edition of a series I call the Wear Test, and these are my all-time favorite videos to put together. I really wanted to take a moment to look back at all the knits that I've recently finished and see with more time and wear how I'm actually feeling about them. Because I think we have a tendency as knitters to spend weeks, maybe months working on it, maybe even years, and you just feel excited. You're happy to have that piece finally in your wardrobe. You intentionally picked knitting that piece for a reason. So you have all the best intentions that it's going to be something that you really love. And sometimes reality is it just doesn't work out that way. And so I noticed even for myself in podcast episodes, I have a tendency to be really happy about something when I'm finished it, when I'm talking about it for the first time. But when I really pause and reflect after, 4 to 6 months, I see if that piece really did work out the way that I wanted. And sometimes I'm really pleasantly surprised. There's pieces that I felt, hey, I actually don't think I'm ever gonna wear this, only to find that I wear it all the time. And the opposite can be true. There's pieces that I'm really, really excited for that when I actually start to pair them with things or I see how they work in the Amsterdam climate, they just don't work out. And that's okay. I think with every piece that I knit, I always learn something. And that's what I really want to bring to these videos and share with you all. Because I think it's really important to look back every once in a while and reflect on your own knitting and your own style. So I really have noticed for myself over the last year that as I've intentionally started to make things in colors that really suit me, in styles that flatter me, I am a lot happier with the knits that I make. And that's not to say that everything works out now, because it definitely doesn't. I have quite a few knitting flops in my wardrobe and I'll share some today. But overall, I noticed that especially as I've been doing this series, my knits are getting more and more consistent. I, in general, am happier with them. And even when something doesn't quite work out, I really understand now why it didn't work out and what I could do to fix it in the future. And those are the things that I then bring into all my future knitting. And so I expect that I'm just going to get more and more consistent, better as I go on. And hopefully also that encourages me to take bigger, bolder chances. Apologies for the lighting today. The sun is kind of coming in and out, so you're going to notice some inconsistencies. Unfortunately, I can't really do anything about that with the natural lighting. Every time I make one of these videos, I see just how much there is for me to still learn about knitting, and that's what I love about this hobby so much. And that's why I'm really excited to share the sponsor of today's video, Craftsy. Craftsy is your online resource for all things creative. They offer more than 2,000 classes in over 20 popular categories like knitting, of course, crochet, quilting, painting, woodworking, even baking, and much more. Classes are broken down into easy to follow lessons and are led by friendly, award-winning instructors who share their creative expertise as they provide step-by-step demonstrations. In these wear test videos, I talk a lot about how my garments fit and how the yarn worked out. So I'm personally taking some classes on how to make better modifications to get that perfect fit. The first class I'm diving into is Sweater Fitting Basics by Amy Herzog, who is a knitwear designer and author based out of Boston. I really like the way her class is structured, as she starts with the basics of reading a pattern and understanding how you select the best size and fit for you from the start, but then ends with how to modify a pattern for a custom fit, and everything in between. I know I still have a long way to go with being confident to modify my patterns in more advanced ways, so I'm excited to dive into this topic more and take these skills into my future projects. The first 1,000 of you to click the link in my description will get a full year of premium membership to Craftsy for only $1.49, and it's valid for new members only. For today's episode, I've got 8 garments to take you through from roughly the last 6 months of knitting. And one of those I actually shared in my first ever wear test video. Now that I've actually had a chance to wear it through a full additional season, I am going to change my rating, and so I really wanted to share that because I think it's important to also look back after even more time in wear and adjust how I'm feeling if needed. I like to try to keep a consistent format for when I'm talking through ease. So there's always 3 criteria that I focus on. 1 is frequency. How often am I wearing that piece? Is it daily, weekly, monthly, next to never? Maybe never, that happens. The second is my overall satisfaction rating. And I always use a scale of 1 to 5. 5 being it's absolutely perfect, I wouldn't change a thing. And I actually have a few of those today. And then 1 is I definitely made mistakes or it didn't turn out how I thought and I had a lot to learn and I have a lot to share. And the third is what did I learn that I would take into my future knitting? And I always have lots of thoughts even on the perfect pieces. In this video, I'm actually going to add a 4th criteria this time, which is would I make it again? As I'm getting more comfortable with making modifications to patterns, I'm realizing that maybe sometimes even pieces that didn't work out, if I just made a simple tweak to those, it could be something that I could make again and actually be much happier with. And on a lot of the pieces that I really love, it may just be that I want to make it exactly as it is, just in a different color, because it was such a perfect fitting knit that I absolutely need more in my wardrobe. This video will not include any details on the knitting process, so if you're curious about any of the construction, any of my learnings on the actual knitting, please go back and take a look at my past podcast episodes. Within those, I always share all my thoughts on the knitting process, so you can find a lot of good detail within those. And I am really good about updating my Ravelry page, so I try to be as thorough there as possible. If you ever have questions about how much yarn I use, what modifications I made, just go follow me on Ravelry and you can find all the details there. And all of those links will be in my show description. Okay, now we're ready to finally get into the fun stuff, which is talking about the knits. The first sweater that I want to talk about is my Gallant sweater by Caidree. This is a piece that I finished in April 2024, and it's the knit that I mentioned was in my very first wear test video that I am going to be lowering my rating for. I made this knit in the Woolfolk 4 yarn in the color aubergine. And this is a worsted weight, 100% chainette wool yarn. And I actually bought it while in Canada at Statement Junkie. I felt this yarn and absolutely fell in love from the moment I touched it. In terms of frequency, I do wear this sweater still, probably on a bi-weekly, at least monthly basis. So that has held up even from the past video that I talked about. I'm wearing it quite often. But my satisfaction when I first finished this was a 4. I really liked this when it came off the needles because the yarn was really soft, it hadn't really stretched out yet, and I just absolutely love the color. But as I've been wearing it, the yarn has really killed this for me. So I don't think I would be as upset if I had spent less, but this sweater, while very basic, cost me 144 euros, which for a basic sweater is definitely on the more expensive side for what I'm comfortable with. But like I said, I really love this yarn. I was on a trip home and I wanted to buy something that I couldn't easily buy in Europe. I do really love a chainette yarn in general, but I think there's just 2 things that happened here. One, I think this particular chainette yarn doesn't hold up that well. So I depill this sweater roughly every 2 wears. It pills really badly, and basically I fill my little depiller completely full every time I depill it. So that already drives me crazy. But also, chainette yarn I think just was not the right choice for this particular pattern. This sweater is meant to have a collar, like a funnel neck that stands up on its own, and the chainette yarn doesn't have enough integrity and structure to it to hold that. So every time I wear it, I notice that it's just pulling down and out, and that neckline is becoming wider and wider. So it no longer stands at all up on its own, which it barely did at the start as well, and I should have made that collar a little bit taller, but I also had really limited yarn on this project, and so I was trying to make the most of what I had, and therefore I made some tweaks that maybe also kind of killed it for me. So in general, while I love the color of this piece, I think the purple is gorgeous. The yarn itself and the material of the yarn just didn't work for this pattern. And the other thing with this is it's really meant to be a completely basic, quite beginner-friendly pattern. I think it's beautiful, but it doesn't include short rows. So therefore, in the back, it does ride up quite a bit. And I thought about adding short rows while I was making it, but again, because I had limited yarn and I was already really pushing what was going to be possible, I knew I was going to be playing yarn chicken. I opted to not do the short rows, and therefore it was a conscious decision. Like I said, I still wear this. I do really like it, but it's definitely not a 4 for me. It's a solid 2 because the yarn. And even though I do wear this sweater still quite a bit, I would say it's not like a go-to feel-good sweater for me. I tend to just throw it on if I'm running errands and I'm wearing a pair of jeans. So it's not something I really think of styling intentionally. I don't wear it if I really want to feel good about myself. It's a casual sweater. So would I make it again? For me, no. I would not make this pattern again. I would not use this yarn again. I do really like the overall style of this type of sweater, but I've since found better patterns for this, including the Winnie sweater, which I've also made and I'll go through in a second. For me, I think this pattern itself is just too basic, and I think I can just do better. So no, I wouldn't make this particular pattern. But if you are a beginner knitter, I would say this is a great one to get going on if you like the look of this and you're not quite comfortable doing short rows. Though I would still encourage you to try short rows because they sound more overwhelming than they actually are. Pattern number 2 is my fancy Pepita skirt. And this is by Ann-Kathrin Stoll. I made it in a size extra small. I was part of the test knit for this. So I started it back in April of last year and finished it in September 2024. And this is made with Lana Grossa Landless Alpaca Merino 160 in the color 404 and 405. And this is a DK weight, 50% merino wool, 50% alpaca yarn. And this is a pattern that I just really loved from the moment I saw it on her Instagram. And I knew I really wanted to be part of the test knit on this. Which, if you know me, you've been watching my videos for quite a while, you know I really don't participate in test knits. So this was quite an anomaly. I knew I needed this. And I'm glad that I did, because at first when she released the pattern, it was just in her book. So actually it took quite a while for the pattern to come out on Ravelry in English. In terms of frequency, I wear this, I would say, on a monthly basis. For most of the winter, I didn't really wear it because it was just a little bit too cold, rainy, windy. I didn't feel like I really wanted to be wearing a skirt in that weather. But as the sun has started to come out, and especially as I finish some of my other sweaters that I can pair with this, I have really started to wear this more, and it's becoming something that I reach for. I originally was going to rate this a 4 out of 5, but when I started to write my notes on my learnings, I realized for me, it's really a 5 out of 5. There's nothing that I would change about this. I really love the way that this turned out. And this was also my very first color work pattern. I had to learn a lot of new skills for this. I'm very glad that it was just the front and back panel and not the entire garment. And it was also just really interesting to put together because there was lots of different moving pieces and you were never working on any one thing for too long. I was a little bit worried making a size extra small that this would be too tight or that the yarn would stretch too much and become transparent, but this has worked out absolutely perfect. I think the alpaca yarn, or the alpaca merino yarn, was the perfect choice for this because it's just fuzzy enough that it fills all those little gaps within the yarn. And therefore it really has enough density that when you're wearing it, you can't see through it, which will become important when I talk about one of my other projects. The fit and length are absolutely perfect on this, and it's really a versatile piece for me. I feel like I can dress this up or dress it down depending how I'm feeling. So a lot of times I'll just wear it with black tights, Chelsea boot, a big sweater thrown over it, and other times maybe I'll pair it with heeled boots, a tighter top, really something that I can go out and feel a little bit dressy. I would absolutely work with this yarn again. I have never used Lana Grossa yarn before, so this is my first time. It was the yarn suggested by the designer, and I'm really happy that I used it because this is something where I actually think I'd like to make a matching sweater, not with the herringbone pattern, but just find a really basic sweater that I can make in the darker brown color because I think that that would be really transitional within my wardrobe. And I do love a little matchy set. And while I only wear this monthly, I would also say it's just simply because it's a skirt. I don't wear skirts as much as I wear jeans, so this is never going to be a weekly wear piece for me. I think monthly for me is good enough on this. Now, would I make it again? I wouldn't make this pattern exactly as it is again. I think it's one of those special pieces where I don't need to herringbone jacquard pattern skirts in my wardrobe, if you know what I mean. But I would actually use this pattern again as a base and potentially do a color blocked version where the front and back panels are a different solid color, maybe to the side and trim. I think that could be a little bit fun. So I think as a base pattern, this is one that I would make again. Maybe also making this in a less wintry yarn, so something that could be used in spring, summer. That could also add a new dimension to it, to just, especially if it was color block, I think that would be really, really fun. Moving on, next we have my Micaela sweater by Moreca Knits, and I made this in a size small, and I finished it in September 2024 as well. This is made in Filcolana Tilia in the color Antique Rose Held Double, and that is a lace weight yarn, 70% mohair, 30% silk. This was actually a knit that I ended up making completely on a whim. So I bought the mohair to do my ppoppo jacket, which I'll talk through in a second. And the color didn't quite go with the yarn that I wanted to pair with. It was a little bit too light. And so I had these 6 balls sitting in my stash, and I didn't really want to have to buy other yarn to pair it with. So I'd been exploring some patterns that I could make, but a lot of them were asking for 3 strands of mohair held together. And then randomly on Instagram, I saw Moreca Knit had posted this Micaela sweater that had literally just come out, I think that day or the day before. I was like, that looks perfect. I love it. It needs exactly the amount of yarn that I have, maybe 1 extra ball. And so I just went ahead and bought it, and I was leaving for Munich that day to go see Adele, and I just cast it on. So I didn't swatch for it, which I know bad, but it ended up working out perfect. I got exactly gauge on this. It was such a quick knit. It was knit up on 5mm needles, so it took no time at all. So in terms of frequency, I wear this, I would say, on a weekly basis. This is a sweater that I throw on all the time with tons of stuff in my wardrobe. Jeans, dressier pants, I wear it with skirts. I really, really like this. I think the length works really well, and so does the ease. And in terms of satisfaction, I'm rating this a 4 out of 5. And I did waffle a little bit between a 4 or a 5, but there are a few things that I would change. And so because of that, that's why I knocked it down. I'm really happy with the overall ease on this project. I have about 20 centimeters on me, and I think that is perfect. It's just kind of boxy enough. I also made the sleeves a little bit longer than the pattern called for, so I really like where they're sitting on my hand. I will say, because the sleeves are straight down, it does pose problems if you need to do anything. The sleeve kind of hangs, so my husband and I went and played jeu de boule one day, and I had to really roll the sleeves up, so full, because otherwise they were just getting in the way of the activity. The Filcolana Tilia yarn is really one of my favorite mohairs. I find it really affordable compared to some other mohairs like a Sayer, and I think it feels really soft and nice. So if I had to compare it, it's probably closest to knitting for Olive. And I really like that the color is quite consistent. It feels solid, whereas some mohairs have that silver kind of thread that runs through it that gives it a different haze, like the Sadness Garn, whatever the Sadness Garn mohair is. Part of the reason that I'm giving this a 4 is I'm not completely in love with the color. I do think it looks good on me. It's just not typically a pink, well, in general, pink is not really a color that I gravitate towards, and this particular one I find quite light. However, every time I've posted it on Instagram, I've gotten a lot of really positive feedback, and everybody seems to love it. So yeah, it's not a color where I'm like, I don't like it enough to not wear it. Clearly I'm wearing it because I have been wearing it weekly. I never bought this mohair with the intention of using it on its own. I'd always meant to pair it with something. So really, I just used this because I had it in my stash and I wanted to cast on a sweater, but I don't think it's a pink that I would have intentionally purchased on its own. And then the main reason for the 4 out of 5 is the neckline on the sweater. I do really like how she does her necklines and her patterns. I think they're very interesting and it gives a really, really clean finish. Where I have a challenge is the neckline feels quite wide on this. So I picked up exactly the amount of stitches that the pattern called for, and I knit it to the length that it also called for before folding it over. And it just feels a little bit big and chunky for how delicate the rest of the sweater feels. And I think it's just a challenge I have with mohair sweaters in general. I do like a mohair sweater, but I'm not sure I love the look of ribbing on a mohair sweater. So the rib trim, the rib neckline, I'm starting to think I-cords are my preference. So I just made the cognac sweater. I much prefer the I-cord finishing there. And I would also really like to try folded over hems and collars where it's just stockinette, similar to Cami number 9 from My Favorite Things Knitwear. I have no idea if that would work on mohair, but it's something that I like to try in whichever my next piece is that I use mohair only. So would I make this pattern again? I think absolutely. I really love the saddle shoulder details of this pattern. I like the overall fit. I would just pick a different color to use for my yarn. And if I were to do it again, I would modify the neckline on this. So let's say I kept the trim, I did everything else the same. With the neckline, I think I would pick up fewer stitches so it cinches in a little bit. And I would probably do the length of it a little bit shorter. So maybe cut 2 to 4 rows out of the neckline and then fold it over and see if that helps. I originally thought maybe I would just not do a folded over collar and just do straight ribbing like the rest of the piece. But for me, I have that on my sweater number 1 from My Favorite Things Knitwear. And I really don't like just the single layer collar. So that's something that I would maybe try. Originally, I thought the collar on this one would bother me enough that I would actually rip it out and redo it. But the more I wear it, the less fussed I am about it. I've decided to just leave it and potentially make another one of these and do it differently that time. So it's a 4, but it's really close to a 5. Like there's only small details and technically it's probably a 4.5, but I decided in this video I'm not going to give half stars. I'm just going to go Goodreads style and do full solid stars. Next is my ppoppo jacket, and this is by Aegyoknit. I made it in a size 1 and I finished this in October 2024. The yarn I used is Lanagato VIP in the color 13737, and that's a fingering weight, 80% merino wool, 20% goat cashmere. And this yarn is really luxurious. I love the feel of it for the price. And then I paired it with the Assayer mohair in the color 69. And that is lace weight, 75% mohair, 25% silk. So if you've been with me for a while, you know the ppoppo jacket was a whole saga last year. I bought that Lanagato VIP yarn in Lithuania back in May of last year, and then had every intention of casting it on because I'd originally also bought Cardigan Kids Seta to pair with it. I did a swatch. The mohair was too orange for the VIP yarn, so I really questioned myself, decided to hit pause and wait until I could find the perfect mohair. Then I bought that Filcolana Tilia that I just showed you on my Micaela sweater. It ended up being too light, so I scrapped that plan. Then I bought the Assayer in 69, and that ended up being a near perfect match. But that went on for months before I finally cast this thing on. And I was so excited to get this jacket cast on because I really love this pattern and I couldn't wait to have it in my wardrobe. In terms of frequency, I am only wearing it roughly once a month right now. It was so cold here this winter and windy and wet that I ended up primarily just wearing heavy sweaters. Not so much cardigans, especially this one, it's quite light. So there just wasn't a lot of opportunity to wear it. And when it comes to overall satisfaction, I am rating it a 3 out of 5. While I was really excited for this piece, it just hasn't quite turned out how I thought. First of all, I absolutely love my yarn choice on this, both the Assayer mohair and the Lanagato VIP. If you haven't tried this Lanagato VIP yarn before, please go buy it. Do yourself a favor, it's amazing. That cashmere makes it feel so luxurious, and the best part is it's so affordable. I paid €6.25 a ball for this, and I only needed 4 of them. So really the mohair ended up being far more expensive on the sweater than the VIP. So you really feel like you're getting a luxury yarn without spending a lot of money. And then I've said it before, I really love the Assayer mohair. It is on the pricier side. I think I paid €11 for it, but it's buttery soft. It is just my definite number one mohair that I use. And so if I really have a piece that I'm excited about, that typically is the mohair that I will reach for. I'm sure that there's much nicer ones out there, but I've had really, really good luck with the Assayer mohair, and so I do use it quite a lot. Why is this project a miss for me then? Why is it only a 3? The biggest thing on this is the length. So this pattern is a jacket, and it has a little bit of a trapezoid shape, I guess. It's meant to kind of sit a little bit higher in the front and longer in the back. Now, I knit this pattern in a size 1, and I knit it to the length that the pattern called for, because in the pattern photos, it seemed like it would be long enough at the back, and with the moss stitch that's used for it, I figured that it would stretch quite a bit in blocking. This was a scenario where I really should have trusted my gut. If I'm ever in doubt, I tend to do a mid-project block just to be extra sure before I do finishing details. So if I need to add more length or adjust something, I can easily do it without the hassle of actually needing to go back in later and fix it. I didn't do that in this case. The way that this works, and I said I wouldn't get into construction details, but it's important here, you do the I-cord all around the body here, and it's a mix of live stitches and ones that you're picking up. So it's also really a piece that once you're done, it's a lot more challenging to go back in and fix later. So this is one that I'm definitely not going to be modifying. If I really want it, I will just knit it again. If I had done a mid-project block, I would have seen that where it was sitting on my body, it was riding up too much in the back. So you'll see in the B-roll, you can see my shirt in the back of it, and that drives me crazy. And the only way to fix that is to kind of push it back down my shoulders, but then it causes the triangles at the front to sit too high on me. So overall, I'm just not finding the right fit and drape on this. I really, really like that it's just a casual piece I can throw on. I think it's comfy. I just wear it around the office a lot of times with what I show in the B-roll, which is a white t-shirt. So it's nice in that way. I think it looks good with wide leg trousers, with jeans. It's very versatile, but it's not the fit that I was hoping for. And unfortunately, it's just not a piece I can easily fix. It did grow quite a lot in blocking. It just didn't grow exactly the way that I wanted. So the sleeves definitely lengthened, and now they're almost a little bit too long. So they do really get in the way. And I'm finding if I'm cooking or something, I have to take this jacket off because the sleeves just hang down and get in the way of everything. And so I'm really running the risk of dragging them through food. So it's not the most convenient piece in the world, but I like the color on me. I do like just the very casual nature of this knit, but it didn't, for all the hassle and struggle of getting the right yarn for this, it didn't turn out how I hoped. I'm curious how I'm gonna feel about it as we go into spring, because like I said, in winter, I'm only wearing it monthly. Don't tend to love this piece over long sleeve shirts. So I think now that we're getting into the kind of weather where you can wear a t-shirt and this over, my rating on this might change. I may find that as spring and summer come, it actually becomes a piece that I get a lot more use out of, but still just based on the fit alone, I'm not sure that my opinion is going to drastically differ in a few months from now. So would I make it again? Probably not. Similar to the fancy Pepita skirt, this is a more unique item that I feel like I only really need one of in my wardrobe. With the moss stitch, with the fit and styling of it, it's not something I really necessarily want a lot of. I think just having the one piece in a unique color is more than enough for me in my wardrobe. I would maybe make a similar jacket in the future, but not this particular pattern again. But I am happy that I have the one. Okay, we're halfway through. I feel like I've been talking forever. But like I said, I love putting these together and really sharing my thoughts on them. So hopefully you're enjoying it too. The next knit is my Braidy loop cardigan. by Otherloops. And I finished this in November 2024. And I knit it in a size small. It's made with Asayer Jensen yarn, which is a DK weight, 100% merino wool, has a bit more of a rustic property to it. And I paired it with the Asayer mohair, and both of them are in the color 2S. And the mohair is, again, lace weight, 75% mohair, 25% silk. So that's 2 pieces now in this list that I've made with that mohair frequency. So if I'd filmed this a month ago, my answer would have been literally never. I finished in November and I never pulled it out and wore it even once. But I have been making more of an effort in the last little bit to wear it. And so I would say frequency is monthly, but I would maybe even up that to bi-weekly, especially now that I've actually gone in and added a shank to my buttons. I think it'll be a piece that I do throw on a little bit more. I finished this in November. I folded it up, I put it in my closet, and that was it. I said at the start of the video, you know, typically you finish a knit and you're so excited and great, you can't wait to have it, and there's a warm and fuzzy feeling. This piece was not that, and if you watch my podcast on it, you'll know that even as I was knitting this, I knew I wasn't gonna love it. I made such a mistake picking the color of this yarn. It is this icy grayish white that I keep picking for myself, despite the fact it doesn't work on me. It washes me out. I don't feel good in it. But I'd already bought this yarn, and this was a very expensive piece. So this cardigan was over 150 euros. And I just kind of felt like I had to push through and use this yarn. And I was really excited to have this particular cardigan in my wardrobe. So that outweighed the fact that I didn't really love the color. Realized while I was editing this that I completely forgot to say that the satisfaction score is 3 out of 5. Maybe let's start with the positive. I do really like the overall fit and oversized feeling of this cardigan. I do think it's really easy to just throw on and feel comfortable in. So that is nice. I think, you know, at first I was worried that it was a little bit too tight and a little bit too long on me, but then I did an extra wet block. I stretched it out a little bit more width-wise, and it brought then the length up and the ease got a little bit bigger. And ever since then, I've been really, really happy with that part of it. Okay, the not so good. So we talked about the color. That is an issue all on its own. And I promise that I am never, ever, ever going to knit with this color again. You've seen it multiple times in my cardigan number 4, my cardi jumper, and my cumulus blouse, and I'm done. Now, the biggest issue for me on this piece is the button band. I followed the pattern on this despite the fact that I figured I shouldn't. The pattern just calls for basic ribs. So you do 2 rounds of setup with double knitting, and then it's just a ribbed button band. And based on what I've heard other knitters talk about and the way that I've seen cardigans turn out, I really was thinking I should probably do a double knit button band on this, but I was feeling a little bit intimidated about that because I'd never done it before. And I figured the designer probably knows best. If she wanted a double knit button band, she would have done it on this, and she didn't. She did ribbing. So I decided to follow that, and I wish that I hadn't. I think part of the problem is because I didn't add that shank to the buttons originally and I really sewed them down tight, the ribbing has stretched out because they need to really cross over the button, and that's causing it to pull. So you'll see in the B-roll, the button band is a little bit wavy, it's tugging, it doesn't look straight, and I'm really not happy about that. So I've added the shank, I did a steam block on the button band, and I really can't get that waviness to go away. It just is what it is. I think the yarn has stretched and there's not a lot I can do. I thought about doing another full wet block and see if that helps, but I actually think the only way that I'm going to be happy with this cardigan fully is if I actually rip out the button band and do a double knit. And I will say I am talking myself more and more into that. As much as it's going to be a hassle, I posted on Instagram asking for advice, and everybody said, you know, you've already spent so much time on this cardigan, the yarn's expensive, just take the time and do the button band properly. So I do think I'm going to take that into consideration. Now that we're getting into warmer months, it's not my top priority right now. Going into next fall, I think I will take the time and actually do this. I have more than enough yarn left over, so that's not an issue. and I will just make this a piece that I actually like. The other thing on the cardigan is with the color, I am considering dyeing it, and I was thinking of maybe doing a more natural dye, so tea bags or coffee or other natural materials, because I decided I don't necessarily want to change the color drastically. I just want to warm it up a little bit. So if anybody has tips on how to do that, point me in the right direction, send me some links, reach out to me. I'm also a little bit scared that just because of the cost of this yarn, if I try to dye it and I'm not happy with it, I'll kind of have ruined the piece. But I guess worst case then I can do a full dye job and really do a darker color to just make it something wearable. But it'd be kind of a shame because there is this nice heathering within the yarn and I don't want to lose that property. So just warming it up would help. So any tips on how to do that, please share, because I would really like to turn this piece into something that I love and that I can bring that satisfaction score from a 3 to a 4 or a 5. So would I make this pattern again? For me, it's a no. I really enjoyed the construction of this and the making process, but with the saddle shoulder, I'm not sure I really love it on me. It is a bulkier piece. It's not typically what I would knit for myself, but the moment I saw this cardigan, I fell in love with it. I really wanted it. I don't do a lot of cabling, and I just like that this was a single cable kind of up and around. It wasn't a ton of extra work, but it is just a little bit bulkier on me than I would like it to be. I also think the length is a little bit too long. I'm noticing for myself, I do prefer when my sweaters and cardigans are a little bit more cropped. I find them more versatile. So I could obviously do that if I made this Braidy loop cardigan again. I could just shorten it, but I don't think I love the pattern enough to actually make it again. I don't feel this strong desire to have this cardigan in my wardrobe in a second color and a shorter length. There are so many other cardigans that I want to make, and I'm going to prioritize those first. Next up is my staple skirt by New Wave Knitting, and this is a custom tailor fit pattern, so there's no specific size. I finished it in November 2024. I made it in the Retrosario Rosa Pomar Vova yarn in the color 7, and that is a sport weight 100% Portuguese wool. Okay, frequency, never, not once. I have never worn this since I finished it in November. So I struggled with which satisfaction score to give this one. I have waffled between a 1, a 2, and a 3. And I think I've landed on a 2 for this. So that's the second 2 in this video that I'm giving. Now, the only reason it's not a 1 is because I like the color and this yarn. So I really enjoyed the Vovo yarn. It is something that I would use again, probably in a sweater, anything that requires a bit more structure and integrity to it. And I do like the pattern itself. Getting that out of the way, no issues with the actual pattern and no issues with the yarn. This one fully 100% comes down to my execution of this project. But I have so many issues on this, so where to begin? Okay, first things first, why do I never wear this? I honestly have no idea. I think a lot of it just comes down to my lifestyle lately. I find, this color a little bit dressier feeling, and I don't necessarily want to wear it into the office. It's been cold. I don't really like the way this looks with black tights underneath it. I think it's something that looks a lot better with just bare legs. So that's part of it. I think I haven't really had an opportunity within the season to actually wear it. So again, this could be a piece that I come back to in a few months and I've got a completely different opinion on it. I leave space for that. I do think the fit on this is pretty good, but I had some major gauge issues. Originally, because this is a tailor fit pattern, you can buy any yarn and use any needle size, and you just input your gauge and measurements to the pattern and it will spit back the exact pattern directions that you need to follow. So I did that, and my gauge originally was 21 by 30. So I put that into the pattern, I knit it, and then I was getting to the length where it was saying I would need to start doing the hem. And I'm like, there's absolutely no way that this is long enough for me to do the hem. So I measured, I was trying to get to roughly 43 centimeters or 45. I think I was at 40, maybe not even that. So I ended up adding more length, hoping that, okay, in blocking, this will probably grow and it's gonna be fine. I blocked it, it turned out nice. I put it on and I'm like, oh, it still feels quite short. And it's at a length at least where it's almost at the end of my fingertips. So it's not that it's scandalous enough I wouldn't wear it, but it's definitely shorter than my ideal skirt length. And then when I measured my gauge at the end, I realized my gauge was so off on this project, and I have no idea how that happened because I gauge swatched. The only thing is I didn't do it in the round, but usually I don't have massive issues on that. So my gauge, which was supposed to be 21 by 30, ended up being 25 by 34, which is a huge difference. Basically, this skirt is tighter than it should be and it's shorter than it should be. And then that brings me to the other issue, which is I think because my gauge is tighter, when I put this on, because I knit it to the measurements that were given to me, it stretches out, which causes it to be extremely see-through. So the first time I put this on, my husband was like, whoa, that I can see everything under that skirt. So I ended up having to buy this little simple skirt slip thing, which is also a little bit too long. So I have to really pull it up and then put it under so that you can't see it at the bottom. But then while you're wearing this with the skirt, it also makes it difficult to then tuck another shirt into it like this. So I just don't really feel comfortable every time I've put it on and considered wearing it. I'm like, oh, it's a little bit too short. It's a little bit too tight. I don't like that it's see-through. So while I like the color, and I do like the pattern, I just am struggling with all these little individual issues together. And yeah, that's basically what is impacting my overall satisfaction. So would I make this pattern again? In this case, you might be surprised to hear that I would, because like I said, I don't mind the pattern on this. I love the fact that it is a custom fit skirt. I just have to make sure that next time my gauge is really what I expect it to be. So probably I should gauge swatch in the round. And I think also one thing I'm learning with skirts is if your yarn already doesn't have a fuzzy property to it and you're not pairing it with something else, you're probably going to end up with a see-through material. So if I were to make it again as well, I would probably hold 2 strands double to add enough density that you're not going to end up with that transparency. So I would use it again as a base pattern because I like the folded hem. I like the way the waistline fits. I think it was really easy to follow. It's simple increases and decreases, but my particular execution of it right now is not where it needs to be. I'm going to try to wear it in the warmer months and I'll report back. Now we have the Winnie sweater, which is a pattern by Woozy by Celine, and I finished this in November 2024. I made it in a size small. It is made in Isayer Eco Soft yarn in the color E4S, and this is a worsted weight yarn in 56% alpaca, 44% cotton pima, which is a really interesting blend that I've never tried before. In terms of frequency, I wear this weekly, sometimes multiple times a week, especially as it's been cold and this is just an easy piece to throw on. This is basically the pattern that I would suggest instead of the Gallant sweater by Caidree. I think they're very, very similar fits, but this has more special details in it that provide a better fitting piece at the end. My overall satisfaction for this is a 4 out of 5. But it's very, very close to a 5, and I'll talk you through why it's only a 4. Now, the sweater was a surprise for me because I really had no intention of knitting it. A viewer, Lee, she ended up gifting me this yarn because I sent her my Tulsa tee that I wasn't wearing, and so she sent me this yarn as a surprise thank you. Originally, I had intended to make the Levitate wrap by My Favorite Things knitwear, but I was gonna have to buy additional yarn and probably another ball of this. So I was looking around to see what else could I make with this Eco Soft yarn. I'd never seen it before. And that's when I came across the Winnie sweater. So that was the yarn that she called for in the pattern, and I had enough yarn to actually make it, especially without the bell sleeve. I decided to cast it on, and I'm so happy that I did because this is really one of my favorite sweaters. It looks like a basic sweater, but it actually has some really nice details to it. With the funnel neck to prevent it from curling down because it's stockinette, she added in a non-curling round where you pick up a stitch, a purl stitch from the row below, and knit it up. So that helps give it some more structure to stand on its own. And then you do the same on the bottom hem, and you're meant to do the same on the sleeves. I didn't do it there because I wasn't worried about it rolling. And then this pattern actually has short rows as well, so it's just a better fitting pattern. This is actually a sweater that I wear a lot because it's become my kind of, when I want to feel good about myself, this is the sweater that I put on. I wore it to my first day of work. I'll wear it when I'm doing a presentation, basically any moment where I just want to feel confident but not overly dressy. This has been the sweater that I've been reaching for, which has been such a surprise for me because I wasn't expecting that, especially for such a basic sweater. Now, the only reason that I'm giving it a 4 and not a 5 is because of my specific execution. So basically, I did a really sloppy job of the collar. When I was doing the pickup round for the non-curling row, I had a really tough time finding the pearl bump with this yarn. So the EcoSoft is a really interesting yarn, but it has a lot of threads and fibers coming out of it that make it a pain in the ass to actually knit with. I did not enjoy the knitting experience. And I was knitting in winter, it was dark at night, and so it just was extra hard. Even when I had my neck light on, I couldn't really tell what I was picking up. And because I'd never done this technique before, I really wasn't expecting it to be that noticeable. So I was like, okay, I can just do it around and it'll be fine. And then when I got to the end, I realized, okay, if you don't do it perfectly, you do end up with some jagged kind of edges and it looks sloppy and it does curl a little bit. So if I'd done a nicer job of that, I think I would be happier. But when I wear it, I do notice the neckline doesn't look quite right. The EcoSoft yarn, I did not enjoy the process to knit with. I found it just really uncomfortable. The yarn was kind of scratchy. Like I said, it had all those little fibers and they kept getting stuck in my needles. So that was annoying. But when I blocked this, that yarn did soften up a lot and I do enjoy wearing it. I don't find it itchy on my skin. So I'm happy that I knit with it. I'm very grateful also that I got that yarn as a surprise because I wouldn't have probably picked it on my own. I'm really happy with the color of the yarn. I think it looks really nice on me, but I wouldn't knit with it again. I wouldn't actively choose it for myself. So if we start talking too, would I make this pattern again? For sure, I would make the pattern again, but I would probably do a yarn paired with a mohair rather than this combo yarn with the fuzziness, because I just wouldn't want to knit with that and have the same experience. And for that non-rolling technique, Woozy by Celine does have a YouTube video where she takes you through it. So anybody can access that. And I really suggest if you have challenges with especially your stockinette rolling, go find that video. I'll try to remember to link it in the show notes. And that is a great technique to just, even if your pattern doesn't call for it, just add that in because it does help a lot. I tried to do the hem originally without adding in that non-curling round and I got about a quarter of the way through and was like, oh, I can already tell that this stockinette is going to roll up. So I went back and I put it in correctly because I otherwise knew I was probably going to have to rip out the entire bottom after blocking and do it anyway. We've made it to the final piece and the absolute showstopper rock star of this whole video. And that is my sweater number 11 light by My Favorite Things Knitwear, and this is a modified version of it. I finished this in January 25, so this year. It's my most recent knit, and at the moment, the only finished garment that I have from this year, and I'm filming this in March. I made it in a size small, and it is made in the Gepard Garn Pure Lana in the color 142, and that is a DK weight 50% merino wool, 50% alpaca yarn, and I held it with the Knitting for Olive mohair in the color oatmeal, and that is lace weight 70% mohair, 30% silk yarn that I use all the time. This is a sweater that I wear not just weekly but multiple times a week. It is my go-to favorite sweater right now, and therefore the score is a 5 out of 5. Similar to the Pepita skirt, there's not a single thing that I would change about this. I am 100% in love with this sweater. It's my favorite of all time. Like, this is a sweater that beats every other sweater that I've ever made, even though it's really, really basic. I love the fit of this. I ended up modifying this pattern after seeing a knitting project on Instagram do hers. So she omitted the twisted rib for regular rib trim and then did a folded collar instead of the whole folded turtleneck. And so I've always had this pattern saved for years, and I never made it because I didn't really want a turtleneck. I don't find it that practical in Amsterdam, which is where I live. So when I saw this version, I was like, oh, that sweater just has such nice drape on it. It looks perfect. So I decided to make it. I originally was going to just use the Pure Lana yarn held on its own, but then I did a swatch. It was a little bit too gapey and it felt like it was too much of a one-dimensional color. It was really missing something. So I slept on it. I actually had a bit of a sleepless night turning this over in my head because I was going to cast it on the next day. Knitting problems. And I woke up and was like, no, I need to wait. I need to get a mohair. So I'm really happy that I bought this Knitting for Olive Oatmeal because it gave it just enough dimension that it makes it a little bit more interesting while still being a perfect basic neutral color. Like I said, there's not anything that I would change. I have a probably near flawless execution on this piece. I don't think I made any mistakes. The 30 centimeters of positive ease, I think actually might be my ideal positive ease, especially on a drop shoulder. I think it just looks perfect. It's not too oversized, but it does feel like it's meant to be a cozy oversized sweater. And the color is neutral and versatile enough that I have been able to pair with everything. So I wear it a lot with my fancy Pepita skirt, and that's actually been what's pushed me to wear my fancy Pepita skirt more. And then I also throw it on over jeans. I could throw it on over baggy trousers. It goes with almost every single thing in my wardrobe, and especially in that color. The yarn also, the Pure Lana, is one of my new favorites. And I think I'm realizing here, I'm really enjoying alpaca yarn. I've never really used it before. And, you know, with the fancy Pepita skirt, with I just said the Winnie sweater has alpaca, this sweater has alpaca. So I'm just really enjoying the feel of it and the way that it wears. So would I make this again? 100%. I already have every intention to buy yarn and cast on another version as soon as possible with the exact same modifications that I made. I'm dreaming of a really deep, rich chocolate brown version, and I'm just debating, should I try a different yarn combination or should I just do exactly the same? And I think I'm leaning towards the exact same yarn because, like I said, I love the way that the drape is on this, and I don't really want to mess with that because if I do, I may not like it as much. So I think I'm going to go with the Pure Lana again in a chocolate brown. Maybe I'll use a different mohair. I really want another one of these, and I could see myself maybe even making other versions, more colorful ones, because this for me is the perfect sweater. I want all of these in every variation. So it feels so good to end on a high like that. And, you know, just to share some stats, I had a goal for myself in 2024 to knit from mostly new designers and try new yarns. And I had no idea how successful I'd been on that until I started to put together this video. Of the 8 patterns that I showed, 7 of them were from completely new to me designers that I had never ever knit from before. And I used 7 new to me yarns. So you might ask why it mattered so much to me to be knitting from other designers. And I think it's just because I feel like it really helped expand my skill set. My favorite things knitwear and petite knit, while they make beautiful patterns and pretty much everything I've made from them has been a wardrobe staple for me, they tend to always write in a very consistent way, and I know what to expect. And when you're knitting from another designer, you're challenging yourself because you are seeing how somebody else views a pattern, what techniques they use, what construction methods. And I have really expanded my skill set. And so, for example, the neckline, the way that she does it on the Micaela sweater, completely new to me, something that I will take into other patterns. The non-rolling technique on the Winnie sweater, also something that I will take into other patterns. So there's stuff like that where I wouldn't be exposed to that if I wasn't knitting from new patterns. And so that's something that I really want to carry forward in 2025, and something that I really encourage all of you to do. If you find that you're in a bit of a comfort zone and knitting from the same people over and over, just give it a try. Try somebody new and see how it goes, because I promise you, you will probably learn something new. I also found some new yarns that I really loved, like the Lanagato VIP, the Gepardgarn Pure Lana, and the Retrosario Vovo yarn. But then there was also a few flops that I wouldn't use again, like the Essayer EcoSoft or the Woolfolk 4 yarn. I did my first proper button band on a sweater and realized that double knit button bands are the way for me in the future. So at least now I know that and I won't make the same mistake in future cardigans. And I branched into the world of knitting skirts. So I always had the intention of making myself a knit skirt and I kept putting it off. And last season I made 2 of them. Even though I'm not wearing one, I definitely learned a lot, and I know I am already going to be casting on another skirt, which is my skirt number 1 by My Favorite Things Knitwear. And I'll be making it in the Essayer Tweed Aran yarn here in the color Confetti. So maybe that skirt will get a lot more wear, especially going into spring. 2 of these spontaneous cast-ons that I did, the Micaela sweater and the Winnie sweater, ended up being 2 of my favorite sweaters in my wardrobe. So sometimes it does pay to just get some inspiration and cast something on and hope for the best. It doesn't always work out, but sometimes it does, and those might be your favorite pieces. Making the ppoppo jacket and Braidy loop cardigan, even though neither of them turned out exactly as I hoped, it did inspire me to now make more cardigans, and I'm really on the hunt for the perfect cardigan pattern. So if you have suggestions, let me know. I think the Paul cardigan is high on my list, as is cardigan number 8. Those will probably be the next 2 that I tackle. And overall, this video showed me that I'm getting much better about knitting within my color palette and picking colors that really suit me and my skin tone. I don't think there's any really big flop other than my Braidy loop cardigan. For the most part, everything else that I made really fit within my wardrobe. So that's everything that I'm taking away from this video. And like I said, I love putting these together. They bring me so much joy and energy. And it also just gave me a lot of inspiration. I've been in a bit of a knitting funk. And like I said, I finished 1 piece this year. We're now deep into the 3rd month of the year. And I've just realized I miss knitting. I really want to get back to it. And so this has inspired me. I've got lots of plans now for spring. I'll be sharing those soon. I can't wait to do the next one of these videos. So if you enjoyed this video, please don't forget to like and comment. Tell me which knit you have loved and which one has flopped for yourself recently. And if you'd like to stick around on my knitting journey, please don't forget to subscribe, turn on bell notifications. I post podcast episodes and additional content like this at least once a month, if not more. And thank you for being here. I've really appreciated sharing my thoughts, and I hope you got as much enjoyment from watching this as I did making it. I'll see you in the next episode.